You promise yourself this time will be different. You're done with the same patterns, the same mistakes, the same outcomes that keep showing up no matter how hard you try to change. You make a plan, you set intentions, you commit to doing things differently. And then, 3 months later, you look around and realize you're right back where you started. Same type of relationship that doesn't work. Same career frustration you swore you'd fix. Same financial stress you promised to escape. Same version of yourself you were trying to leave behind. The details change, but the pattern stays identical, like you're trapped in a loop you can't see clearly enough to break. And the worst part isn't that you keep ending up in the same place. The worst part is that you can't figure out why. You're not stupid. You're self-aware enough to recognize the pattern. You genuinely want to change. So why does your brain keep leading you back to the same outcomes you're actively trying to avoid? Here's what nobody tells you about patterns. They don't repeat because you're broken or self-sabotaging or subconsciously want to fail. They repeat because your brain is doing exactly what it's designed to do, running on autopilot using the most efficient neural pathways it's already built. And those pathways were constructed from experiences and beliefs you internalized before you were conscious enough to choose them. We've been taught that changing your life is about changing your actions. Want different results? Make different choices. Do different things. Take different actions. And that advice sounds logical, which is why people follow it for decades without understanding why it never actually works long term. Because actions are the visible output of an invisible system. And if you're only changing the output without addressing the system generating it, you're just creating temporary deviations that will always snap back to the default pattern once your willpower runs out or life gets stressful enough to trigger your automatic responses. Your brain operates on what neuroscience calls prediction loops. Every moment, your brain is predicting what's about to happen based on what's happened before, and then it acts on those predictions without asking your conscious mind for permission. These predictions run faster than conscious thought, which is why you find yourself reacting, choosing, and behaving in ways you didn't consciously decide to do. And here's the trap. Your brain isn't predicting based on reality. It's predicting based on the model of reality it built from your earliest experiences, the framework you developed as a child about how relationships work, what you deserve, who you are, how people treat you, what's possible for someone like you. That framework is still running your life, not the updated version of you that's read books and done therapy and learned better. The original version, the one that formed before age 7, before you had the cognitive capacity to question whether the beliefs you were absorbing were actually true or just the particular dysfunction of your specific environment. Think about the last time you repeated a pattern you swore you wouldn't repeat. Maybe you chose another partner who was emotionally unavailable. Maybe you stayed too long in a job that didn't value you. Maybe you sabotaged something good right when it was working. In the moment before you made that choice, what were you thinking? You probably weren't thinking, "I'm going to recreate my childhood wound," or "I should choose the person who will replicate my parents' behavior." Your conscious thoughts were probably very reasonable, but underneath those thoughts, your brain was running predictions based on the old framework. This is what relationships look like. This is what I deserve. This is how people like me are treated. This is what happens when things get good. This is the prediction trap. Your brain is predicting your future based on your past, and then making choices that fulfill those predictions, and then using those outcomes as evidence that the predictions were correct. You're stuck in a self-fulfilling loop that feels like fate, but is actually just neurology running on outdated programming. Jennifer couldn't figure out why she kept attracting the same type of man. Different names, different jobs, different surface details, but the same core pattern. Charming at first, then gradually revealing they weren't actually available for real intimacy, then leaving her feeling like she'd done something wrong to push them away. She'd been through this cycle 7 times. She kept trying to change her approach, be more independent, less needy, more interesting, better at communication. She read the books, did the work, genuinely tried different strategies. But the outcome never changed because she was trying to solve the wrong problem. The problem wasn't her approach, it was her brain's prediction about what she deserved and what relationships were supposed to feel like. When she finally traced it back, she realized her brain had learned at age 6 that love means someone being there but not really there, that affection is something you have to earn through performance, that disappearing is what people do when you need them most. Her father worked constantly, was home but absent, praised her achievements but never really saw her, and her brain built a model. This is what connection looks like. 30 years later, she wasn't consciously choosing emotionally unavailable men. She was unconsciously gravitating toward the familiar, toward the type of connection her brain had learned to recognize as love, toward the dynamic that matched her original prediction about how relationships work. And every time she chose that pattern, her brain filed it as more evidence that the prediction was accurate. This is the familiarity magnetism that keeps you stuck. Your brain isn't seeking what's good for you, it's seeking what's familiar, what matches the existing neural pathways, what confirms the predictions built from your earliest experiences. And familiar feels safe, even when it's destructive, because your nervous system equates known with survivable. But here's what makes this particularly insidious. Your conscious mind creates narratives to explain the unconscious patterns. Jennifer didn't think, I'm choosing this because it matches my childhood template. She thought, this person seemed different, I really thought it would work this time. I must be doing something wrong that makes them leave. Her conscious mind was trying to make sense of behavior driven by unconscious prediction, and the sense it made was always self-blame and confusion. Because the real reason that her brain was running a program installed decades ago by a 6-year-old's understanding of love wasn't visible to conscious analysis. So you can spend years trying to figure out what you're doing wrong, why you keep making the same mistakes, what's broken in you that needs fixing. And that search for what's wrong with you is part of the trap, because there's nothing wrong with you. There's just outdated programming running predictions about reality that no longer match your actual life.
Marcus kept ending up in jobs where he felt undervalued and underpaid, working harder than everyone else, but somehow always passed over for promotions and recognition. He'd leave, swearing the next job would be different, and for a few months it would be, until the pattern reasserted itself, and he'd find himself in the exact same dynamic with different people. He tried everything. Different industries, different companies, different types of managers. He worked on his confidence, his communication skills, his ability to advocate for himself. But 6 months into any job, the same pattern emerged. He'd be doing the hardest work, while others got the credit and advancement. In therapy, he discovered the prediction running underneath. As a kid, his younger siblings got all the attention because they were the babies, and he learned that his role was to be the responsible one who works hard and doesn't complain, while others get the rewards. His brain predicted this is how social hierarchies work. Some people are valued, others do the work. He wasn't consciously choosing to be undervalued. His brain was unconsciously gravitating toward environments where that prediction could play out, accepting treatment that confirmed the belief, and behaving in ways that kept him in the familiar role. And every job where this happened, his brain logged as more proof that this is just how things are for people like him. This is the role lock that keeps you repeating patterns. Your brain assigned you a role based on your early environment, the overlooked one, the disappointing one, the too much one, the not enough one. And decades later, you are the only one holding yourself in that role, not consciously, unconsciously, with the very part of your brain that generates thoughts. So what actually breaks the cycle? If conscious effort and willpower and trying different approaches don't work, if your brain keeps defaulting to the old predictions no matter what you consciously decide, how do you actually change the pattern instead of just becoming more frustrated by your inability to change it? You have to intervene at the prediction level, not by trying to think differently, but by feeding your brain new data that contradicts the old prediction so strongly that it's forced to update the model. Your brain doesn't change based on what you tell it. It changes based on what actually happens repeatedly enough to overwrite the original programming. This is why affirmations and positive thinking don't work for pattern breaking. You can tell yourself, "I deserve better," 1,000 times. But if your experiences keep confirming the prediction that you don't actually get better, your brain will trust the experience over the affirmation. Beliefs change through experience, not through repetition of desired beliefs. Sarah understood this after her fourth failed attempt to set boundaries with her mother. She'd read all the books, knew all the communication techniques, understood intellectually that she had the right to her own life. But every time she tried to enforce a boundary, she'd feel overwhelming anxiety and guilt. And within days, she'd be back to the old dynamic.
Her therapist explained her brain had learned at age 4 that setting boundaries with her mother led to emotional withdrawal and punishment. That early experience built a prediction: boundaries equal abandonment. And now, 30 years later, every time she tried to set a boundary, her nervous system activated that prediction and flooded her with anxiety designed to prevent the predicted abandonment. Knowing this intellectually didn't change the prediction. What changed it was practicing setting tiny boundaries and staying present for what actually happened instead of what her brain predicted would happen. The first few times, her anxiety was overwhelming, but she sat with it instead of running from it, and her brain started collecting new data. Boundary set. World didn't end. Mother adjusted. Relationship survived. After months of this, not thinking differently, but creating actual different experiences, the prediction started updating. Her brain began to expect that boundaries might be survivable instead of catastrophic. And as the prediction shifted, the behavior that came from it shifted too. She wasn't fighting her anxiety anymore. The anxiety was decreasing because the underlying prediction was changing. This is the experiential override. Your brain updates predictions based on repeated contradictory evidence. But the evidence has to be experiential, not intellectual. You have to actually live through the thing your brain is predicting won't work, survive it, and let your nervous system register that the old prediction was wrong. Which means breaking the loop requires doing the thing that terrifies you precisely because it contradicts your brain's core predictions about reality. If your pattern is choosing unavailable people, breaking it means choosing someone available, and sitting with how wrong and uncomfortable that feels. If your pattern is undervaluing yourself, breaking it means demanding your value and tolerating the anxiety that says you'll be rejected for it. your brain will scream that you're making a mistake, that the old way was safer, that this new choice will lead to disaster. That's the prediction system trying to pull you back to familiar territory. And if you listen to that fear and retreat to what feels comfortable, you've just confirmed the old prediction and strengthened the neural pathway that keeps you stuck. But if you move through the fear, take the action that contradicts the prediction, and survive the outcome, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it doesn't go perfectly, your brain starts collecting evidence that the old model might be incomplete. Do it enough times and the prediction shifts. Do it consistently and the pattern breaks. This is why small, consistent exposure to pattern-breaking behavior is more effective than big, dramatic changes. Your brain needs repeated data points, not one-time experiences. One good relationship won't override a prediction built from 20 years of dysfunction, but choosing differently again and again, staying in discomfort again and again, surviving what your brain predicted you couldn't survive again and again. That's what rewrites the code. Daniel spent 2 years intentionally choosing discomfort over familiarity. Every time his brain predicted, "This won't work for people like me," he did it anyway and tracked what actually happened. Most of the time, the catastrophe his brain predicted didn't occur. Sometimes things didn't work out, but not for the reasons his brain had predicted. And slowly, the predictions started updating. He noticed the shift when he caught himself expecting something positive instead of automatically assuming disappointment. His default prediction had changed from "things don't work out for me" to "things might work out. Let's see what happens." That shift from negative certainty to neutral curiosity was the evidence that his brain had finally collected enough contradictory data to update the model.
And once the model updated, the behaviors that came from it changed automatically. He didn't have to force himself to think positively or try harder or overcome resistance. The resistance decreased because the prediction driving it had shifted. He was operating from a different framework. And different frameworks generate different behaviors without conscious effort. This is the model update that breaks the loop. Your brain isn't the enemy keeping you stuck. It's a prediction machine doing its job. Feed it better data through repeated experiences that contradict the old programming, and it will update the model. The pattern breaks when the underlying prediction shifts, and the prediction shifts when reality consistently contradicts what the old model expected. But here's the final piece most people miss. Breaking the pattern requires accepting that for a while, everything will feel wrong. Your brain has been running on one model your entire life. That model feels like reality, like truth, like just the way things are. Updating it means living in a space where your instincts are telling you one thing and your conscious choice is doing another. That gap between what feels true and what actually is true is where pattern breaking happens. And it's deeply uncomfortable because you're essentially asking your nervous system to distrust the predictions it's relied on for survival. Your body will interpret this as danger. Your emotions will try to pull you back to what's known. That's not resistance to overcome. That's information that you're actually challenging the core framework. Lisa experienced this as a constant feeling of, "This is wrong." For the first year of her healthy relationship, everything felt off. His consistency, his emotional availability, his respect for her boundaries. Her brain kept predicting the familiar patterns. He'll leave, he'll betray you, this won't last, don't get comfortable. And she had to keep choosing to stay anyway, to trust the actual evidence over the predicted disaster. She described it as living in two realities, the reality her brain predicted based on her past, and the reality actually happening in front of her. For months, those realities didn't match, and the cognitive dissonance was exhausting. But she stayed with the discomfort, kept choosing the person in front of her over the prediction in her head, and eventually her brain started updating. The moment she knew the pattern had broken was when his consistency started feeling normal instead of suspicious, when emotional availability started feeling safe instead of threatening, when her nervous system stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Her brain had finally collected enough data to build a new prediction. This is also what relationships can look like. And from that new prediction came completely different behaviors without effort, without willpower, without fighting herself. She stopped testing him, stopped creating problems to see if he'd leave, stopped protecting herself from an abandonment that wasn't coming. The pattern broke because the prediction underneath it had fundamentally changed. So, if you're stuck in the same loop, here's what you need to understand. You're not stuck because you're broken, or because you don't want to change badly enough, or because you keep making the same mistakes. You're stuck because your brain is operating on predictions built from your past, and those predictions keep generating behaviors that fulfill themselves, which keeps the cycle intact. Breaking it requires doing what contradicts those predictions, even when it feels terrifying. Staying with rewrites the code that's kept you circling the same outcomes your entire life. Your thoughts aren't the trap. The predictions underneath your thoughts are the trap. And the only way out is through the exact experiences your brain has been trying to prevent you from having because it predicted they wouldn't work. The loop breaks when you prove your own nervous system wrong often enough that it has no choice but to believe you.